So I look at you now and you're so happy and you're eating and you're drinking and things, right? And I'm going to bring up some interesting topics today which I think are really, really important and many people don't speak about. So anybody loves React? A few people love React. Anybody likes Angular? Yeah, what are my web components people? 2? Okay, that's okay, that's okay. Dart people. The entire right team, I'm sure, Dart people. Yeah. So this session is not about any of those things at all. It's about something very different, actually. So when you think about new adventures, right, or new front-end things that are happening today, many of us are thinking about things like Houdini and web components and everything you can do in React and React hooks and all of that. And it's very interesting that these are not really challenges. All those things are kind of technologies or things that we can use or we can apply. Maybe we can't use them today, maybe we'll be able to use them like in a couple of months, in a couple of years. But there are much more fundamental things that really define in a way of how we're using the web. And as I was doing a lot of research over the last year, in front-end and everything around front-end, there were a couple of topics that are kind of forgotten in some ways, and once you encounter a project that kind of contains these problems from those areas, these sort of things really start becoming very painful. So I want to highlight some of these adventures that we haven't kind of solved yet, really big issues that are kind of everywhere, but we are really just getting started with them. And so this is kind of the session behind that. Now I have to warn you, the things you're going to see today, you will not be able to unsee. And I don't mean it in a good way, actually. Because some of those things are kind of complicated, they involve a lot of thinking, and these are not really easy challenges to solve, right? And I'm going to start with something that many of you probably don't think about that much because it's not been embedded in our design process or in our development process that much. And that's the notion of privacy, right? Who is familiar with the wonderful, shiny new thing called GDPR? Oh, everybody has heard of it. Who is excited about GDPR? Okay, so honestly, I have to ask you at this point one thing. Who honestly believes that GDPR is a waste of everybody's time? It's a safe place. We can raise hands. Okay, so it's maybe, I would say 20%, 25%. Right? So if some of you have suffered through the pain of implementing something that had to deal with GDPR. The thing is, when I think about GDPR, it's just one example of things that I think are moving in the right direction, but things that are not implemented properly. And it's not the lawmakers it's not their fault. They just don't know better because we don't really participate in this process. So we have to think about it for a while. So this entire year was really painful for me, really painful, because I had to study how people design with privacy in mind, how people build with privacy in mind, how people test with privacy in mind. And it's been incredibly difficult, because the way people think about the web has changed dramatically over the last year. Now, how did we get to the point where this is normal? I mean, if you think about the web that it was like, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, right? The shift has been fundamental in many ways. So when I was running those interviews and I was studying, teaching in the University of Amsterdam, and I was there for 1 month speaking to students, I was kind of shocked in many ways how they see the web and how they perceive the web. They don't even like the web, because every time they go anywhere, this is what they're getting into, right? And it's not even that most of the time, it's just many interfaces are really, really bad. I mean, we learned how to create and craft beautiful things, right? But at the same time, we learned how to create really horrible things. And they kind of coexist sometimes. So if you want to build your own boat, because you want to spend 1 million euros to buy a new yacht, for example, because who doesn't want to have a boat at some point, right? You end up with this kind of interface where it looks beautiful, and you can select the preset that works for you, and then what you're getting in a configurator for your boat is this. Half a carousel, they don't even give you a full carousel, just half a carousel, right? 2 hamburger icons for the price of 1, I guess, right? And then again, remember, you're about to spend 1 million euros or something, maybe, right? And then you kind of start clicking around, and then you realize, there is this button, hide summary button. You tap on it, and then this beast disappears. That's great, but then it appears again, right? And these are the interfaces that just exist everywhere, right? This is my favorite example ever. I will never forget this. So this is one from a bank insurance company. If you want to set up your new bank insurance, this is the interface you're getting. And essentially what you have here is a very simple question. do you have children? And there must be a designer or developer both sitting in front of Sketch or Photoshop or Figma or InVision or anything else, really, sitting, do you have children? Slider. It has to be a slider. And the thing about slider is there's a minimum property, or the minimum value, and the maximum value. Now luckily the minimum value is kind of obvious. I guess it would have to be 0, but the developers have to make a decision about what the maximum will be. And luckily they did make a decision about what the maximum should be, because the maximum here is 5. Right? Now if you have more than 5 children, or you're planning to have more than 5 children, there is a fix or workaround for you, because whenever somebody gives us an interface, we can find a way, a workaround, right? You can click on the pencil icon, and then that beast turns into an input field, right? And you can type in 7 there, but then of course the interface will tell you, 5, because the interface knows better, right? And this kind of interfaces are everywhere, and they're not only that, some of them are just extremely disrespectful. Like, look at this. I mean, oh sorry, I have to go back now. So this is an interesting website. So if you don't like insects, please close your eyes now. It's not going to be beautiful in any way. But somebody is designing this as well. So this is a website that allows you to find a tool to kill mosquitoes in your home, right? And I can almost see the A/B test running. Let's make it a little bit more gray. No. Let's turn it red. Let's turn that red splatter. Let's change the hex color of the red. Right? And so there is a configurator for that, and then guess what? There is a slide bug on the slider. How often do you see that in your life, right? And then you kind of move from one step to another. You have to say where the bugs have invaded your house, and then you answer a couple of questions, and it looks like a regular configurator, right? And then they provide you with an answer. This is the tool you need. The best part about all of this is not the interface, but the fact that this entire site has exactly one product to sell. Right? And so we build these things, which are kind of really disrespectful in many ways, because we try to deceive people. And not in the way like Friedman does it, right? I mean, this is an old design, but I still remember vividly, because I'm like an elephant, I never forget. I remember vividly that moment when you booked a flight with Ryanair. The insurance was added in for you automatically, unless you opt out. Well, to opt out, you need to know how to opt out, because to opt out, you need to find "Don't insure me" and meaningful again in Denmark and Finland. And again, so we are laughing because we think this is stupid, and we know why they do it, because they try to trick people into something, right? But people are really done with it. They don't trust interfaces, and more importantly, they don't trust us building those interfaces and designing those interfaces. Which is why the first thing that somebody does when a push notification pop-up comes up is close. Because nobody wants that in their life, right? And it's been very interesting, because we just pushed it all over the edge. Like, this is an Instagram ad that came up recently, like, not recently, like last year or so. Because, this is just an ad, but people, designers, realize that if you Photoshop a hair onto the ad, people will start clicking, because nobody likes to have hair on the phone, right? And of course, clicks increased, engagement didn't really, but they actually reached the goal, right? And then somebody said, oh, we can do better. Let's add some dirt to a banner. And of course, engagement increased as well. And then, of course, the new world was invented with wonderful, beautiful, harmful push notifications. My meeting would like to send you notifications. No, I don't want to stay alive, or allow. Right? Isn't that nice? How wonderful that is. Now, how come that we actually ended up in a world like this? By the way, they ran an A/B test, and they decided to go with a slightly different variant of it. Which performed much, much better, right? Much better. And my favorite one is, you unsubscribe from an email, and they send you, oh, well, it will take us up to 7 days to remove your email from their database. And I always feel like this. It's like they put the email on a donkey, and the donkey has to go over the mountains, deliver that notification about an email that has to be unsubscribed somewhere else over there. And so it will take like 7 days or so to get there, right? And so this is kind of the new normal, and that's actually quite sad. And it's not even that. Even if you look in something like policy, privacy policies. Oh wow! I decided to do 2 things for this entire year. My year was horrible because of that. First thing, every time I sign up for a service, I'm going to fully read its privacy policy. That took me a lot of time, much more than I expected. A lot of time. So every time somebody sends me, oh, please check that out, that's a big story for me. I really have to dedicate my entire weekend to reading the privacy policy. It's a big commitment. The other thing I decided to do is every time you get this GDPR cookie consent prompt, I'm going to go to extremes to deactivate everything just to see how hard they made it for me. It's been very painful. Very, very painful. And I learned so much from this. Like, for example, there is a wonderful F-Secure company which provides network uplinks. And so what they ended up is, if you look in the privacy policy, you'll find a Herald clause, which is very nice. You agree to assign your firstborn child to us for the duration of paternity. Now, that's unusual. Now, luckily, they confirmed that they will not enforce the clause. Anybody using Amazon? I guess in some way, many of us do. Amazon has one of those products which is called Amazon Lumberyard. And essentially, it's a game engine tool which allows you to build, how would you put it best? Build creatures, I guess, using Amazon's products for games. Now, have anybody read service terms of Amazon Web Services? That's a fantastic reading material for Sunday evening. Highly recommend to read it. It will take you approximately, I would say, 7.5 hours. And it's really, really painful to read because you don't understand most of it, right? It's horrible legalese. But if you scroll enough to actually, I think it's 59 or 5710, you'll find out a very interesting clause, which is also known as a zombie apocalypse clause, which essentially restricts their responsibility in case the US Center for Disease Control will identify that there is a widespread viral infection transmitted by bites of contact with bodily fluids that causes human corpus to reanimate, seek to consume living human flesh, blood, brain, and nerve tissue, and is likely to result in the fall of organized civilization. Right? Fantastic stuff that they can find. Anybody use Face app? It was just mentioned in the previous talk. Well, somebody sent a link to Facebook to me. Did you read the Face app terms and conditions? You know what really fascinates me in some way? Like all these little things, like little tools and apps show up, and they just do one little thing well, right? That's cool. But how come? And the interface sometimes is really horrible, but they do this one little thing well, right? So they take time, though, to create an incredibly lengthy privacy policy that collects all the data that belongs, apparently, to them after you used it. So if you look at the Face app's terms and conditions, and find out that everything that you submit to them belongs to them forever. More than that, they can use your photo in any way they like, in any product they will build in their life. How nice is that? Why do they need it? They don't need it, but of course, data is a very lucrative business these days, right? Have you asked yourself, for example, why is it that none of those services that we're using, like Instagram and Facebook and all of them, they never provide a premium option to pay for them? I mean, if somebody had an option, for example, told you you can pay $3 to use Instagram without advertising or tracking, would you pay for it? Maybe some of us will, but they would never do that because your data is much more valuable than that because of data brokering I'm going to talk about next, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those crazy people who will have Tor and use only Tor for browsing the web and all, right? But my eyes were open to actually realize the impact that all of the data collection has. I think there are many things that we need to know as developers about that as well, right? If you go further than that, obviously they can use and monetize it in any way they like, and more than that, they can also sell this data to third parties by putting a device identifier that will actually tell the third parties who you are, right? And so if we look into the state of things, it doesn't look very nice, friendly. So we started fighting back, especially after this happened. Would you like, you go to watching a video on YouTube, and all of a sudden there's a crypto miner script running and building bitcoins, not for you, by the way, for somebody else? That's not friendly, right? So we started fighting back with things like adblock, and I thought for a long time that it's just me, or us. Like, we are people, we know how ad blockers work, we know how to find the workarounds and stuff like that. And it was very surprising that ad blocker is actually a mainstream thing at this point. For a long time, I really thought it's just me. I use all the Facebook blockers and tracking blockers and all of that. But no, it has become a mainstream, especially for people between 18 and 25. There is no way somebody in that group will not use an ad blocker. People beyond that age will probably be not using it, right? But it's something that's kind of coming. And there is a war going on, a holy war. Every single day, there's a commit on Facebook where they change classes and they change the way sponsored as text is written. Because you can write sponsored in many different ways. The trickiest one is when you replace the O with the 0, and then you put an SVG on top to actually cross with the white, color to cross the stem, so it looks like sponsored with an O, right? There's a huge war, and then if you look into the actual code going on there, this is just madness. This is, I think, they use 5 divs, 9 spans, and 30 CSS classes to kind of obfuscate this little part so it's not blocked by ad blockers. And even I remember vividly the moment like 2 or 3 years ago when there was a big movement against ad blockers. Like ad blockers have to be illegal, right? And they lost. And it's been very interesting because now there are also tools like this, like block ad block, right? Where advertisers or publishers can actually gain control back by forcing advertising onto the users. Now, luckily, 2 days after this got released, so, ad blocker, right? And this war just keeps going and going. It's not a war that advertisers and publishers can win, right? And of course, there are all these tools, and unfortunately, it's also a strange business because when you start getting deeper and digging deeper, it's incredibly horrible because there are tools like AdBlock Plus that also gains money by whitelisting companies that do not want to be blocked, right? And then there is Ghostry that collects data about what advertising people are tracking, people are blocking, and then sells this data to advertisers so they know what is being blocked, right? And it's just remarkable. I mean, if you think about it, this is a strange thing that's happening today. It's so incredible. It's unbelievable. It really is, right? And still there are things like Facebook Container and the recent innovation in the world of blockers, stop chat pop-ups. Because, this little intercom or all those little bubbles showing up because people don't like that too. And the better one, I was really surprised when I saw this. Track this, did you see this one? Mm-hmm. Essentially it opens hundreds of tabs to Lamborghini and all of those websites, casinos and so on, kind of changing the profile that Facebook knows about you. So you can change your identity for tracking and end up them not really understanding who the hell you are. Right? Because you can create your own personality, your own identity that's totally different from your real identity. So you will not be targeted as well as you probably are. Who thinks that actually advertising on Instagram works well on you or for you? Actually, Instagram is probably the only service that has a remarkably good marketing in terms of advertising. The ads that are displayed there are actually extremely relevant. But the ones on Facebook, for example, are not so much. Right? So it's been remarkable. And then make Medium readable again. And we started fighting back. And we're really successful at it. Incredible. Like many people that I was interviewing, they have 8 to 10 extensions like this installed. And that was not normal, let's say, 5-7 years ago. This is also a nice one. Clickbait removal on YouTube. Because you can actually select a thumbnail, or upload a thumbnail that looks a bit more attractive maybe for a regular audience, and then it replaces it with the actual photos that you might not like as much, right? So if I sum it all up, of the state of things of where we live today, it's kind of looks interesting. So whenever you see a pop-up model, block. Automatically you're going to block it. No, you're not going to pay any attention to it. Whenever somebody wants to push notifications, block. Chat window pop-up, most of the time, they don't come in the right time, so block. Install app prompt at the top, like, hey, please install me, block. Maybe you would like to import our contacts, right? Or maybe somebody had an idea that it's a good way to spread the word about an app by letting people import their contacts from the address book. No way anybody is going to do this because of a LinkedIn situation, right? When LinkedIn was just spamming everybody about LinkedIn, people remember it vividly. Video autoplay, block. Geolocation permission, no way, block. Unless, of course, it's something like theater, we need to buy tickets to local theater, that might be a thing. But GDPR could be considered, okay. I have nothing to hide, this kind of thing. Advertising block, oh, this is a fun one. If somebody asks you to turn off an ad blocker, oh, there are 2 strategies we developed. We're so good at this. I mean, there is no way they're going to manipulate us into whatever they want. No, we know our way out. So there are 2 main strategies. First one is incognito mode, or private window. Who does that? I know you a little bit, yes? The second one is, well, people sometimes have a special browser that they install for things that are not professional, I would say. Right? And this is probably also one which has ad blocker and whatever not installed, and they're kind of turning into a different browser for that particular reason, right? And the same goes for camera and photos, syncing contacts, I mentioned it already. email input. Well, we don't have just one email, do we? No, no. We've learned the hard way. Imagine you are at the airport and you have to sign in to get Wi-Fi. And you have options to sign in with Instagram, with Twitter, what else? Facebook and email, right? Who would choose Instagram to sign in the Wi-Fi at the airport? No, we won't let them in, no. That's too personal. Like Instagram, this is precious. No, 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 we won't let them in. No, no, no. Who would use, what was the other one? Facebook to sign in. A couple of people, but not that many. Twitter? Also a couple of people. Email?
Yeah.
What kind of email will that be? Because we have a first-class citizen email, and, you know, the other one. The other one, which is usually a wonderful inbox full of, you know, new accounts and, I don't know, surveys and forms and spam that you would never read. It's a wonderful email to be in. And I'm really curious about people, actually about database of email addresses submitted in the airport Wi-Fi. I think it's such a creative goldmine of all the things that people invent. They're unbelievable. But most of the time, it's really, really hard to get a proper email from somebody. Because we always have the second one, which is something we use for things we don't really care about much. The same goes for social sign-in. Sometimes we do if we need to finish something quickly. Most of the time we don't, though. Capture. There is not much we can do if we see a capture. Now, normally it's invisible, but if we do see it, there is not really nothing we can do. And there's really this thing which is I have nothing to hide mentality. And I think this is wrong on so many levels because it's not about having something to hide. It's about protecting something that belongs to you. That's very, very different. I don't want, for example, if I talk to somebody, I just don't want somebody else to be able to listen in. And it's not just about, you know, oh, Facebook knows everything, or Google knows everything. It goes much deeper than that, because you never know where your data might land. So, for example, there is this really huge thing happening right now, which is called menstrual surveillance. Because it's very useful, apparently, to collect data about, you know, menstrual cycles and sell it to managers who might know if somebody wants to have a baby or not. Right? How remarkably horrible is that? Right? And they collect the data, and maybe if a manager or if a bidder is willing to pay for it, they're willing to share it. How nice is that? And if you look into terms of services, yeah, they can totally sell it because you signed up for it, right? And it's really a big deal because nobody really controls it, right? So it's terms and services, you sign up, so you give the data away, so it's up for you. And it's not even that. You know, your data might end up everywhere. Like the same goes for health insurance, right? If they know exactly what you're looking at, and data that you're looking at, how often you're looking at a certain thing, right? They might change maybe the interest rate. So they might change the amount you're going to pay every month. You don't want this kind of thing to happen to you as well, right? Anybody had this phobia of, oh, we talked about something, and then maybe a couple of hours later, it showed up on Instagram. Anybody experienced that before? Right? Do you think that this is just something strange? Actually, it's proven that it's every time we have the phone nearby, even if it's turned off, it is listening because approximately 1,000 times a day, it sends strange audio messages back to Facebook. And Android is actually worse than Apple at this point, or iOS, because it sends much more data back to services. So it actually does happen as well. And so if we look at all of that, it's kind of really horrible. So it's not very surprising that this data is really valuable because it's not about, again, having something to hide. It's about simple things. Like, for example, you probably don't want your manager to find out that you're looking for another job before you found another job, right? You might not want to, you know, your girlfriend to know that you're going to propose because you're looking for engagement rings, for example, on Google, right? Before you propose, that would be very useful, right? And this kind of leakage is happening quite a lot, right? So we kind of need to have some sort of control over it. And actually, this GDPR thing was supposed to fix it, right? It's also wonderful reading material for Friday night, Saturday night, of course, which I also had to read. And it's not as horrible as it sounds. And one way or another, one important, I don't want to go into details. It's like, it's an evening we're eating pizza, it's not supposed to be GDPR talk, right? But one important thing to know about is that this is an evolving standard, an evolving thing. So right now, we are dealing with all these horrible pop-ups and cookie prompts and that everybody hates, right? But as of now, there is a big discussion happening about e-privacy directive, which kind of encompasses GDPR as well, which is going to bring the settings, privacy settings, and control about the privacy back to the engines, the browser engines. Meaning that if you're using any browser of your choice, you will have a choice to say, I do not want to be tracked, I do not want my data to be used for marketing purposes, and so on and so forth. And then it's going to be your responsibility as developers to respect the browser setting, right? So this is really going to change everything, and especially if we look into something like marketing, advertising is going to be affected a lot by that. And I'm not being here saying that advertising is horrible, let's kill all the ads. I think that advertising is very important for the healthiness of the web, but tracking is not. There are many, many companies that make incredible business and revenue out of using your data every day, and your data belongs to you and not to them, right? And so when we look into GDPR, think about it as an evolving thing. And there's been a really strange discussion happening recently. I don't know if you followed it or not. Because people start thinking about the responsibility we have as developers and designers. Right? So people who develop and design Facebook, they have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. Right? So there are some legislators thinking, so web development, web thing is a profession, right? Okay, so if you look at doctors, well, doctors need to study and get a degree and get a license to practice, doctorship, right? To be a doctor, right? Think about lawyers. Well, they need to study and they need to get a license and practice law, right? Shouldn't designers and developers study and get a license to be able to design and develop? Would you be okay with that? Like if every developer had to have a license in order to develop in React, you need a specific license for that, a React license. Would you feel comfortable with that? But all these conversations are kind of happening because there is no control. All this is a Wild West. And so this is something that's a really big issue that can be solved if you just look into the privacy by design framework. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but essentially it outlines some of the principles that we need to follow in design and development to avoid those things that are kind of happening. And it's not just because it's better, it's the right thing to do, but because the GDPR is only the starting point. I'm sure that many of you know that we have, where is it? Hold on. We have a new thing coming up, which is California's new data privacy law, which comes into force on January 1st, which is like GDPR, just GDPR light. And again, another thing that's also being discussed now, imagine that every single state in the US would have separate privacy laws. Mm-hmm. You would need to adapt your application if you want to get customers from those areas, right? You need to adapt it in, for every single state. That would be horrible. It would be really, really bad. So hopefully there is quite a bit of movement from the privacy community, which has been very silent for many years, in kind of making sense of it all, right? Because right now it's really, really creepy in many ways. And it's even better because there are always new bills coming up because legislators don't really understand the web. And so there is this new proposal essentially which is saying, oh well, if you're running a news website, well, if you have, let's say, a semi-naked woman on the photo or in an article somewhere, maybe we should avoid children under 13 to be able to see that image. So shouldn't every website actually ask the customers or the users coming to the site if they're over 13 or not? And if they're not, we should get parents' consent so they can see the site. So we end up in a world where we don't have just GDPR cookie consent prompts, but also age prompts everywhere. So for California, for example, that would be really, really strange, right? But again, it looks like we'll be getting to a better place soon. It's just a matter of time now. And I think when we look into GDPR, it's just one of the examples of where it's not perfect, but I think it's still a thing that's moving in the right direction. Now, enough with privacy for now. There's another thing that's also very interesting, and that's authentication, right? Usually when we think about authentication, we tend to think about it being on-off thing. You're either logged in or you're logged out. You're either signed in or signed out, right? Well, sometimes, of course, we get to deal with this beauty. I mean, luckily it's almost past at this point because with the invisible capture that was introduced by Google, it's actually kind of gone, but it still shows up in some places. And interestingly enough, when we think about capture, we think about this, right? We don't think about this, think about this. Somebody is looking behind somebody else's shoulders, trying to get what they're typing in capture for some reason. No, just kidding. What's really surprising about capture, by the way, it doesn't work at all. So if you're still using capture, it's just no. Why? On average, a user needs around 10 seconds to solve a text-based capture. And have you ever heard the audio version of a capture? That's a piece of glory. It's incredible. It belongs to a museum somewhere. For somebody who wants to resolve an audio capture, it takes 30 seconds to resolve it, right? And 20% give up after a few tries. Now what's really great about this is there is no capture anymore that machines cannot solve but human can. Right? Because the machine learning has become so incredibly powerful, the algorithms are really great algorithms that can solve any capture with 99.8% accuracy, while humans can only get 33%. Right? So there is no reason to use capture because most captures will be broken in 0.05 seconds. Right? So, of course, we have this. Right? I'm not a robot, and then you end up, and you're done. And that's great. Unless it isn't, because then we have this. Right? So, anybody had this experience? That sign, that road sign, is it in this rectangle? Or not? Right? And so actually what many companies are doing these days, because this is really painful, it's not as hard as capture, but it's extremely frustrating and annoying for so many people. So many companies I've been working with, they actually start thinking about a much bigger thing than just putting up a capture and call it a day, right? Which is like a spam prevention strategy, where you actually start blocking IPs that are known as being spammers. And then you ask a random plain human question like, what color is the sun? This kind of thing. But of course, if a spam bot is going to attack you, you're not going to survive that, right? And then sometimes you'll be using a honeypot technique, where there are a couple of input fields which are empty, and then the spam bot, when it goes on the site, will actually fill it in. And so if it's filled in, then it must be spam, so it will sort it out. And then sometimes you will end up with time traps, where you would have maybe 2 or 3 seconds time trap, where you cannot click a button, a submit button, right? So again, you're preventing or slowing down at least a spam attack, right? And only then, when all of this doesn't work, you'll start thinking about captures, because they can cost a lot of conversion for you, right? And so this is kind of what is happening as well, which is kind of interesting, because in the past it was just, let's just put capture on and call it a day. Another thing that's fascinating to me is that people are really great at hacking things around. So whenever you get an interface where you ask for the first name, last name, email address, and verification of your email address, right? There is no way we will type it again. No. How many of you will copy-paste the email address when asked to verify? Right? Well, luckily, developers and designers invented techniques to fight against it, right? So what are the techniques? Well, let's block copy-pasting. Isn't that nice? It's a wonderful experience. The best example I've ever seen in my life is when you have an email as an input field, and then the second one to confirm your email, split into 2 halves, the before the @ symbol and after the @ symbol. Now, when I tested it, people were like, I can copy-paste twice. No problem, right? That's not a big deal. No way I'm going to type it in again, right? So email verification is really extremely unnecessary. Extremely. This doesn't work at all because people copy-paste all the time. They copy-paste mistakes all the time. The key there is, I mean, we do need correct email addresses. The key is to ask the email address when people really care about it. So one thing that we try to test is, here you have to type in and check out your email address. But then when would you ask for the correctness of the email address? Well, at 2 places. Just before people hit that button, the finish checkout button, and when they hit it already. Because this is where people really, really care about the correctness of the email address. They don't want to pay for something and never get the product, right? And so if you make that box here, hey, please make sure that this is correct right before they click that button, the correctness of the email address goes up, right? And even better than that, this is a magical place, the confirmation page. Magical. This is a place where we linger. Once we buy something and we see this confirmation page, we don't leave that page, do we? No. We stay there for a while, right? We stay for a while. We go check our email if the email confirmation has arrived, right? And if it didn't arrive, we start panicking, just a little bit. We start asking ourselves, doubt our life choices, maybe, right? And then comes the magical point, Once you hit the refresh button 2 or 3 times and nothing came in, you do that magical thing because you want the power back. What do? You take a screenshot, or you save it as PDF, right? How many of you do that? Oh, I know you so well. And it's not only us. Normal, people who think tend to, no, people who think, but people who kind of cautious about where they spend their money, they tend to do that as well. And this is why people really, really care about the correctness of the email address. Which is why if you ask it here as well, after they bought something, right, kind of provide an opportunity for them to set up a secondary email address. Works much, much better than the previous one where you just asked to verify your email address. So here you click on send confirmation to another email and you type it in, and then we kind of use that one as a primary email instead. Right? Another thing that's also interesting related to authentication, of course, is password. Now that's also a piece of beauty, the world in which we ended up with. Your password must contain, uppercase, lowercase, magical numbers, I don't know, all those things, right? And it's remarkable because on average people like you probably use password managers, but regular people still use some, memorable passwords, I would put. And there are only 4.2 or so memorable passwords. And what passwords are they? There is a Gmail password. Now that's a password. Lowercase, uppercase, exclamation mark, digits, whatever you need, you got it. The best password belongs to the gallery of passwords. Good passwords. People sometimes remember it, sometimes not. Good password. Second, Facebook. Lowercase, uppercase, exclamation mark, digits, anything. People remember that password as well. Then there is an online banking password, much shorter, usually. And usually people remember it well because they have to use it all. And then there is a fourth password. Yeah, that one. So the moment somebody asks you to set up an account, oh yeah, you're going to use that password, right? Now the problem is only, and this is what your experience it becomes, it must contain an uppercase letter number, a haiku, a gang sign, a hieroglyph, and the blood of a virgin, right? The problem becomes really obvious when you get to the point where your password is not good enough for them, right? So what do? You take your password, because you remember it, and then you add those extra characters to make sure that it actually fits the requirements. Who does that? Yes, right? So I know you fairly well. Now again, at this point, all these extra requirements, they're sometimes not necessary. They really are not, because sometimes it's really much better to set up something like a key phrase or passphrase, like 4 random words or so. Like here at simple.com, using a phrase of 4 random words like pillow, jar, simple, lift is secure and easy to remember. And it is actually secure and easy to remember. And frankly, I didn't finish the study just yet, but it looks like this is actually much more secure anyway for people to remember. Because if they don't remember things, then it's not secure. Jared Spool said once, a very important thing, that if a product is not usable, it's also not secure. Because if they can't remember a password, they will write it down on a piece of paper and put it on a laptop. And that's not secure, for sure, right? And so that's why people start using private email accounts and put passwords on sticky notes, because they forget them, right? And so there is this really interesting change happening where people start thinking about how can we go beyond authentication. I mean, we can use Touch ID and all those things as well, right? But there is something that's much more interesting than that. Anybody knows this wonderful patent? I mean, I like reading strange things over weekends, I'm sorry. But this is a very famous patent. This is coming from Amazon's one-click checkout. And in fact, one-click patent has expired in September 2017. And if we don't trust Wikipedia, we can also go on Google Patents. It actually did expire, which means that we can use one-click checkout in our products today. And this is something that many companies are experimenting now because there is a good tooling for that too. Now, I started looking into how one-click checkout works, and also I asked myself, why don't I see it everywhere? Is it just me? But every time you go somewhere to use a service, you have to log in almost every 3rd or 4th time. That's been very strange. It's definitely not how it's supposed to be, but I never have to log in into Amazon. How come? And so I started looking into how one-click checkout works. Anybody's familiar? I mean, everybody I think knows what one-click checkout does. So it's extremely interesting because everybody can use it today. If you want to increase your sales or conversion or retention, this is something that you need to consider. Now, first of all, of course, Amazon does one thing which most of you cannot, or most of us cannot afford, which is they force you to create an account. You don't have to do it this way, but when you first have to create an account, what we end up doing, whenever you check out for the first time with your product, kind of automatically semi-create account as well, right? The only thing we need is your password. So you have an account because we have all the other data already. And so we need to give you a little bit of a incentive to set up a password, and that's $15 discount on the next purchase. That's usually enough. And now magic, people have an account after the first purchase. But here on Amazon, you have to set up an account first. And then once you do that, this is how you see the products. There is no one-click checkout yet, right? Once you purchase one thing, you have to type in some things like shipping address and payment details and things like that, right? And then comes the magical part. Because if you look into what's happening, they set cookies that are stored for 15 to 20 years, right? So Amazon drops cookie to identify the customer for 20 years, and then that one-click thing, checkout option, is deactivated by default. So if you look into one-click ordering, it will say that the moment you purchase something, you can always click one-click button, and then you can buy things. So next time you come to the page to any product, you can click on buy now with one click, and there is done. Nothing has to be asked at all. There is no forms, there is no credit card input, no nothing. And obviously there's stored credit card data and all, right? But it's really interesting how that works, because no password is needed, and it will never be needed as long as even if you're logged out, as long as this cookie is on the computer. And this is what they say. As long as you ship items to the same address that you have already used and authorized on the machine that you've already authorized on once, you don't have to enter your password for the next 20 years. That's really interesting. I mean, it's not like Amazon can pull it off, so we all can pull it off. But very often we think about authentication being you're logged in, you're logged out. There is nothing in between. But many companies are really looking into this way of there is something in between. Maybe you don't have to be authenticated in order to be able to do something on the application. Does that make sense? Right? So for them, it kind of works as long as you're shipping to the same address, using the same payment details, you don't have to be logged in. Which is kind of interesting in many ways. Now, isn't it magical that almost a month after after one-click checkout expired, there was a new API in town? Anybody used payment request API yet? Couple of people. Payment request API is essentially trying to give us something like Apple Pay, but for everything on the web, right? So you have to imagine you just install a new browser, let's say Chrome, could be Firefox, anything in between, doesn't matter. You pay for something once, right? And then, of course, they save this data, hopefully in a secure way, in the browser. So the next time, what you can do as a developer is just pull information from the payment request API, plug it in, and confirm probably with the CVC code for security reasons, and that's it. No forms or no input fields required at all, right? And so this is what it would usually look like, and it's, again, because it's a native API, it works well on mobile and on desktop, and it works in Safari as well. And the support is actually pretty great, because most features are already available, right? I mean, this is like every single feature on the web. It's the same thing every time. And this is what it's usually going to look like. Right, so maybe you will add an item to the cart. Let me just quickly show it, because it's just a prototype that we built. So you add an item to the cart, you go to checkout. Right, you can get all the information that's already stored anyway. You don't even have to go to this step, but you could potentially. And then you have this one-click checkout button, and then you get this preview. Right, the kind of native dialog, native dialog, where you can select from the cards that you already have stored. You select one of them. You can choose to verify them or not. Right here I'm choosing this one. Then you click on pay. And then here for security reasons we added CVC code, but you can programmatically change it in any way you like. And that's it. There are no forms required at all. Right, now this is nice. And I don't see many interfaces using that, actually, which is a bit surprising, frankly. And of course, the fun part about all of this is the two-factor authentication that's sometimes used in such a strange way. This is one from United, where they consider it to be a two-factor authentication because, first of all, you have a password, but then you have a question. the question, right? The best part about this interface, they give you the choice of questions and also the choice of answers that go with questions. And this is not two-factor authentication at all. This has nothing to do with two-factor authentication. Because when it comes to two-factor authentication, it's when we need two separate things to authenticate. It could be something the user knows, like a password, something that the user has, like device or key, and something the user is, biometrics. So you always need two things. I mean, frankly, this is sometimes what two-factor authentication is. Something you've forgotten and something you've lost, right? Which is a little bit sad, but you know, this is kind of where we're getting, right? Now, I mean, I maybe need like 10 more minutes. Is it okay? Yeah? So we talked about privacy, we talked about authentication. I think if we look into the performance world and design world, there are also something that we kind of tend to forget at times. And this is where the idea of adaptive serving comes into play today. I mean, I guess most of you are running HTTP2 already. Some, okay. There are also many new patterns that evolved in terms of how we're going to load CSS and JavaScript and all those things. What's interesting though is to look at the big picture. I mean, I don't want to go into specific details. I can give you the deck. I mean, it's 1,117 slides, so you can't do it all today. But you will find everything there as well. But it's really important to have kind of this idea of where we live today. Now, we have a lot of people in the world. Oops, sorry, that didn't work. No, that just died. Hold on. That was unexpected. Right. So we have a lot of people in the world. We have 7.6 billion people, and out of them, 3.5 billion people are using an active smartphone, which is pretty decent, I would say, right? There's going to be either Android or iOS. And as of now, as of 2019, we have 20% iOS and 80% Android. Now, if we look into the world, what kind of Androids are those phones that most people are using, right? Well, it's probably not going to be the phone that you have in your pocket now. That's very unlikely. Anybody using Moto G4? No, not a good phone. Not a good phone. Anybody using Nokia 1? No, not a good phone. Anybody using Alcatel? No. Now, what's really surprising about these phones is that they are top best-selling phones in growing markets today. Right? This is a phone that we never heard of. We probably don't even want to see because we don't want to see, right? But they're running Chromium browser that can support every web standard that we know of, right? So they are capable of running your websites and your applications just like every other phone. Unfortunately, they're really bad phones. That's a problem because they are all, compared to iPhone 7, right? They are approximately 12 to 15 times slower, all of them, right? But they're also 10 times cheaper. That's kind of a good deal. You're only 12 times slower, but you're 10 times cheaper than an iPhone. That's kind of okay, I guess. So you can get a really decent, more or less decent phone for around $100, $150, which runs Chromium, right? That's the fact. And in fact, if you look into the phones that are being sold today, these are going to be the phones that are sold most. Now, if you look into the experiences on those phones, they're not great. So most of the time, even heavily optimized apps and websites like Airbnb and Amazon and all of them, you will need approximately 20 to 30 seconds to be able to click on a button and something will happen, right? And every time I talk to managers who are dealing with performance and who are looking at the stats, it's always the same story because they tell me, but we don't have to care about these markets. We don't have to care that much about these people. If we look in our data, there is not even a single person that comes to the site using 2G or slow 3G using one of those phones. That's true, but maybe they don't come to your site because it takes 30 seconds to click on the button and something will happen. Right? They will not come back. Right? And this is a growing market, which is really, really big deal. I mean, if you want to target Indonesia, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, if you really want to think globally, this is the market you have to kind of look into. This is why many companies like Uber, for example, have a very hard time coming to those markets because their apps are just horrible. It's just extremely, extremely slow. But we also tend to think that technology is going to save us, right? So, 4G is coming, has arrived, but then 5G is coming as well. Latency in 5G is 10 milliseconds, which is extremely, it's a huge improvement against 4G already. But the problem is, the infrastructure is getting better, but it's getting better slowly. Because we also tend to use 140% more traffic every year, because we're like chilling and Netflixing and all of that, right? So we end up with 140% more data being used every day. And if we look at the effective connection type, even although we might be on 4G, it doesn't mean that we're actually on 4G. Now, of course, in Europe and in the US, it's going to be the case, but the further you go from the centers of big hubs of the cities, the more likely you are to end up in, in the 3G world, which is still very prominent today. Now, what does it all mean to us? Now, first of all, we know about HTTP2 solving some problems. However, with the multiplexing and all of that, however, it's not quite true. If you test HTTP2 against HTTP1, you'll find out that on good connections, like fiber, for example, HTTP2 will be much faster. On slow connections, especially on mobile, HTTP1 will be faster. Faster in terms of rendering time, when you get to see something usable on your screen, right? So it's not very consistent, and if you kind of try to scale it up and look into performance on big scale, HTTP2 against HTTP1, you'll find out that HTTP1 sometimes performs better because of packet loss. And packet loss is a big deal, because if you look into the US, you'll find that approximately 20% of all traffic is affected by packet loss. And for example, if you're building an app for trips where people can book tickets to go from one place to another, where they're likely to be moving, then HTTP1 might be faster than HTTP2, which is something that the spec people realized, and they ended up inventing QUIC, which has become HTTP3, which is actually coming later this year, because they started working on it in 2016. So HTTP3 is different, it runs over UDP, and it has a fancy logo that you need to remember, which is QUIC, right? But this also in many ways changes the way we're going to deploy in the future, right? Because UDP is going to be much faster, but that means that we definitely need to look into this world of components, of course, and then we definitely have to use Webpack for all those chunks, and this is going to become very, very important. So if you don't use any kind of one of those tools like Webpack, it's definitely a good idea to look into it, because this is going to be very, very important for what's coming up next, right? There was a very interesting talk that Chris Coyer gave about where we are now today as developers. I couldn't get the slides, but here is the link, so I highly encourage you to watch it, because it's fascinating to see how things have moved, right? So we have all these things in the back and in the front, and it seems like in the past, we felt very comfortable, very, very comfortable being here. It felt okay, right? And then we ended up frameworks, and then APIs, and then it seems like we have to cover, as of today, this is why full stack developers, we cover everything. And there are this really strange, obviously there is LAMP stack, but there's also the mean stack, like MongoDB, Express, Angular, Node, where you kind of where things are starting mingling, and you're kind of moving left and moving right, and you cover everything. Then you end up with serverless, which is kind of here. When you have all this Lambda function, cloud functions, and Jamstack, then you have this new fancy one where everything is design systems, so it's star. Design systems, TypeScript, Apollo, GraphQL, React. What kind of stack is that? But it looks like we do so much. Like, we're so incredible. I used to think about it, all the things we know, except, we know HTML and CSS and accessibility from the good old days, and now all those things we need to learn as well. We don't need to master them, but it's important to understand them. So the stack has changed significantly, right? In terms of performance, Google has been speaking quite a bit about this budget of 5 seconds on the low-end phones for our applications, which means that on this kind of 3G, we have 3.4 seconds to Slack, and that means that we have 170 kilobytes to send something usable to those devices. That includes the app, the framework, the router, the state management, the utilities, and all that. And now it looks like we're moving to this slightly more nuanced world, where depending on the connectivity, we can afford more or less of our JavaScript. And so our bundles have to be more responsive in that regard. So if somebody is on slow 3G, you can send up to 170 kilobytes. Right? Somebody on slow 4G, a little bit more. Somebody on Wi-Fi, a little bit more. And that's become a really big thing recently in the beginning of this year. Because all of a sudden, what we started working on is maybe the notion of this adaptive serving for every component, where we would be building components, but every component would be aware of the network connectivity, so it could change depending on what network the user is on. Even more than that, You find some really interesting things happening, like for example on Facebook they introduced the notion of 2G Tuesdays, where developers are highly encouraged to develop on 2G. Well, they're forced, not encouraged. And nobody likes it, but then you get the sense of what it's like, so they have to deploy on 2G. That's no fun, I'm sure, right? And then we'll also get this, which is Chrome Lite pages, right? So if Chrome thinks that you're on a slow connection, but you send to the user too much JavaScript, it's just going to cut off some JavaScript for you. You don't want to be cut off this way, that's disrespectful. So in that way, if you have too much JavaScript, it's just going to be cut off and you don't know what's going to happen, right? Another thing that's also interesting, all those changes where the components change, not depending on the screen or so, but depending on the connectivity, can be targeted or triggered using Network Information API, right? Both on mobile and desktop. The support is coming, right? So that's interesting. The other thing is there is also a device memory API, where developers started thinking about maybe we should not load web phones and not have parallax and not have auto-playing videos if somebody has less than 1 megabyte of memory or 2 megabytes of memory. So we change the experience based on not only connectivity but also the memory available on the device. It looks like all the browsers give us more access to all those fine details as well. And there are new conversations happening now about the improvising or improving the experience of link unfurling, which is also called micro browsers. Anybody heard of that? Right? Where you might want to target or change the experience of how a link will be unfurled in Instagram, when you send a link to somebody, in Facebook and WhatsApp and so on, because you're right in the middle of a very private conversation. That's a very valuable spot, both for advertisers and for you. You want to make a good first impression. So there are even techniques now occurring where, depending on what link is being shared, you can have a carousel with a selection of a product somebody wants to buy, very much like you do it in WeChat in China, right? Which is an entirely new world that people try to optimize for as well. And then, because we don't have enough, there is also Guest.js, which is predictive performance improvement or analysis, where you have your Webpack chunks, and then based on the probability of somebody clicking on a link, or on a button, or moving from one page to another, you can start preload Webpack chunks required to render that route or that page ahead of time, just based on predictability from Google Analytics, from the previous experience of previous users. That's incredible. It's like unbelievable. And this is just getting kind of started with predictive fetching. So essentially you really assign a probability score of being clicked or triggered or activated to every single interactive element. And based on that probability, you actually prefetch certain things. And then there is also quick link, which allows you to do that as well. And then there is also instant page that actually whenever you hover or tap for more than 300 milliseconds, it starts prefetching and pre-rendering the page in the background, getting all the assets. So it feels faster, right? And this has been very popularized by eBay, where they use it pretty much on every single page, trying to be very, very smart. So as you move from one page to another, everything is seamless because everything is happening in the background. The same actually happened with vSport, where they also, speed improvements, yeah, because you preload everything ahead of time. The trick there is, of course, not to preload too much, of course, right? There's so much happening. There's so much happening. It's unbelievable. It's very hard to keep track. Yeah. So we could go here forever, but maybe I would love to reserve a bit of time for questions as well. I think that the most important thing here is, when wrapping up here, is to remember that there are all these things that are kind of happening in the background while we deal with React and Angular and all the Vue and all the wonderful technologies and frameworks, right? And it's really interesting that these big picture things they're always forgotten. I really don't know why people don't use payment request API that much. It kind of kills web forms for checkout. And I don't see it anywhere. And in the same way, you can say that, for example, web components, and I'm not ready yet, we're just playing with them, but React is a bit nicer. I get that, right? And then if you look into some other things and some other technologies, like Houdini is not ready yet, I get that as well, right? But then there are certain things that are actually well supported and we can start looking into them as well. The problem though is, it doesn't matter what you do, you will never get things right. That's the thing I learned the hard way. I really want us all to build the applications that actually matter. And so I want to leave you with two videos, one sad one and the other slightly more positive one. Because I want us to build things that really matter in some way, not in the way that change the world to make a better place, but that really helpful.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music. We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to.
That's where you come in.
Establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button. You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app. And we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in. So, would you care to be my eyes?
Yeah, so the ending is a little bit cheesy, but you get the idea. Because here, the interesting thing about this one, right, is, so this tool is free and it's open source, right? And so, as a developer, if this was like, say, a commercial tool, right, I would feel so bad if somebody was using data of the most vulnerable people because they can't see or they can't speak, right, these kind of things, and use it or misuse it in all kind of strange ways. That would not make me feel happy. That's for sure, right? And there are many people out there who are just vulnerable, they cannot, I mean, we are their last chance to be protected, really, right? And so that would make me very sad. And I'm very happy to see this kind of applications appearing. And again, we tend to lose so much time and attention trying to figure out what is the best button, 16 pixel border radius or 12 or 19 or 22 after all, right? It doesn't matter what kind of button there is. That's not so important. If it's white or gray or black, it's not so important. It's a button, so that's fine, that's good enough, right? So that's very cool. I would love to see these kind of things appearing more. And this is finally the story of my life. It's a very sad story, but the kind of funny one. So you will never get things right, and maybe that's fine. Oh, okay, that's sad too. That's not my thing. But thanks to Portal Studio for the video. And I have cats. Oh, I think I had cats. I have cats and more cats and meow, and thank you for being here. So if you have any questions, feel free. But just one more thing I wanted to say, by the way. So please don't get me wrong. It's not like I want to scare you about the privacy and all of that. I just think that these things need to be known. It doesn't matter if you do something with them or not. If it's perfectly okay with you that you collect, the data is collected, evaluated, and you see personalized ads, that's fine, right? The important thing is that we need to understand the level of data and how much data is being collected and how it's used. That's important. And what we do with it is really up to us, right?
Questions?
Any questions about anything in the world?
We have... You're closer to me, sorry.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the presentation. There was a point you mentioned about developers and designers maybe requiring a certificate or a degree to be able to develop interfaces, but I don't think it's always the decision of developers to put those little annoying things there. Sometimes it's just the things they're told
Absolutely,
to do.
of course.
So
Absolutely, but the thing is, if you have a certificate, then you're obliged to follow what you've been studying. Then you have a much stronger standpoint to say we can't do that because it's against X. And the same way, if you think about accessibility, for example, inclusive design, in many ways, whenever somebody tells you, well, whatever, just plug it in, well, yeah, but then you need to inform them, and that's, of course, if you have to do it, you will have to do it, right? But you have to inform them that if you do that, that's against the law because, there is a certain regulation coming up in the European Union or worldwide about accessibility or about privacy. It's just something that, right now the thing is, it's never been really like Wild West. There have always been some rules, like for example, in accessibility and how the data is protected. Like the GDPR is kind of came, but didn't come out of nowhere. It existed since something like data protection rights, or I don't know, directive, I think, existed since 1995. It's just been renewed with GDPR now, which has gained a drastically new level, right? Which is a change, right? But most of the things existed already. It's just about what is going to happen next. And so, if somebody tells you, okay, we're going to collect the data and we're going to evaluate it in any way you like, this is probably a good point for you to say, okay, if you want to do that as well, but you need to understand that you're going to be liable, right? Because according to GDPR, you need to be protecting, and these are the consequences of your actions. That's a much stronger argument to have than rather than, oh, it's not ethical, right? That's very important. And again, one thing that I think is very important to us to understand here is that when we deal with things like GDPR, somebody has to have responsibility to do certain things or not do certain things. Right? So if somebody comes to you and tells you, we're going to collect users' data and save the credit cards data, well, you're going to implement it somehow. And you can choose to do it in an unsafe way, or you can choose to do it in a safe way and use privacy by design, for example, or not, right? But this is your choice. And you know probably of the first developer who got arrested for developing the wrong thing, which was the guy who developed the Volkswagen GT, what was that? I don't know how to translate it. Sorry?
Dieselgate, yeah?
Yes. So he got arrested and he's now in prison. Because he was asked to do it and he was like, well, I have to build what I have to build. But then he had some responsibility to carry as a result, right? And I'm not talking like we all will go to prison. No. But it's important to understand the consequences of our actions.
Next question.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the talk. It was really thought-provoking. Mine will not be like a question, more like a discussion. So you were talking about preloading and API for the browser or for the app to detect the network and the conditions. And I was thinking sometimes people have limited amount of data, especially when traveling, because roaming is not cheap and usually the packages are very not large. It's like 100 megas or 300 megas. Now with all of those preloading stuff, the apps, when you first load a site or an app, it will preload a lot of data. So maybe if there are some developments in this area, it would be nice that if the browser detects that I'm on a slow network, it would actually show me how much the website is going to cost me in terms of size.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for example, right now, service workers cache, for example, doesn't have any limitations. So it has certain limitations depending on what kind of content you serve, but it's not really controlled, it's unlimited, basically. But of course, it seems like, again, more and more data is being shipped and sent to the user, whether they want it or not. However, for example, in Chrome, they introduced this notion of light mode or safe data mode. So if it's turned on, then it also advertises the header, safe data header, and you can respect that as a developer or not, right? But they do not control. The browser doesn't control what is being shipped to it. However, it will strip away too heavy JavaScript, or if you're trying to put something like a video in service workers cache, right? But it's not. There is no really kind of sense of control. It's again up to us to figure out what we're going to put in the cache, what we're going to ship or not. It's not controlled now yet, at least.
Yes, I see. And this safe space or this header.
Save data.
Yes, safe data. From which version of Chrome it's available? Is it like?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I would need to look up.
It
was maybe around half a year ago when it got released. I think that when the save data header was pushed, was shipped, maybe half a year ago.
I see. So this is in production now, basically.
It's already available. So if you get your Chromium on Android, then it will have it.
I see. Thanks. That's interesting.
Yeah. And again, if you look into those areas which we're targeting, like South America and Southeast Asia and so on, there is a reason why they use Opera Mini so much, or Opera Turbo. There are different flavors of it, because they allow you to save a lot of data. Because, for example, on Opera you will never get web fonts, because why would you? You just want to read an article. Right? So they kind of sacrifice the rendering for the sake of performance and bandwidth. And for many people, that's okay. In those areas. Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else?
Hi. As a person, hello. As a person who developed for those kind of slow and underserved nations in Southeast Asia, what other trends are you seeing there? Because I personally saw a lot of low digital literacy developing for them, and also like the whole like low quality phones. Like those phones are the ones I was testing on, so it was really cool to see.
Yeah. So for example, if you look into China with WeChat, it's just incredible. I mean, it's just such a beast where you can do everything in one place. So whenever somebody sends you a message, it automatically is linked to your profile. It's also linked to, the products in a shop, and you can buy literally with one click everything, right? So that's kind of incredible. I think that what many companies are trying to do now, and it's very hard, is to move their existing company to those regions, and it's extremely hard. Because very often when we think about things like localization or internationalization, we think about let's pick that locale string, translate it, and ship it. No. It's really, really complicated actually, just because everything has to be adapted, right? For example, in Japan, for Japan, Slack decided to remove, like you say, when you send something on Slack, you have a default avatar, when just this random person, right, which you can replace with your own photo. But it turned out that it was extremely offensive in Japan. So in Japan, they replaced photos with just the background, just a blank background, nothing else. And every illustration had to be adapted. And when we tend to think about Southeast Asia, it feels like Asia. Southeast Asia was Asia. But then there was a really interesting story, I think BBC did it, when they pushed an update, I think for BBC app. And it included a photo of a Korean person for Japan. I mean, that didn't go well, like at all, right? Because for us it's too foreign, it's too different, and you really introduce this kind of logic. There is a special language that we need to use when we're developing components for localization, because everything has to be holistic. For example, when BBC decided to move international, like everything in CSS that was float left for Arabic had to become float right. But not only that, because also the padding and the margins have to be readjusted. So every margin and every padding has become a flip function depending on the language that's chosen, right? And then if you look into date stamps, time stamps, and all those things, that also has to be adjusted. Think about Arabic. Arabic doesn't have bold. So you have a lot of bold scattered all over on your landing page. It's not going to work well. So instead, in Arabic, they're using most of the time height to indicate that something is more important, something is less important, right? And there are all those little nuances that make things really, really difficult. However, there is a very nice library, for example, for React called React I18N, where they plug in this very kind of established standard syntax which allows you to write components, or write wording at least, in a way that's really universal. Because even the order of words, when we speak in English, I would say the order of words, but then in Spanish it could be words the order of, an exclamation mark or question mark, right? So it all has to be flexible enough to accommodate for that. And so this really requires a totally more holistic approach. And I think that abstracting away your components to be usable everywhere, that's a really hard bit. It's really difficult.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Vitaly.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So that's the end of our event, our